Philippines have what it takes to manage the risks of a nuclear power plant? Let's dive into that a bit. We are joined tonight by Patrick Aquino. He is the director of the Energy Utilization Management Bureau over at the Department of Energy. Director Patrick, good evening and thank you for joining us.
Yeah, good evening, madams, and thank you for having me tonight.
Okay. It's good that we have you tonight because the weather is really bad up north, and every time there are these adverse and extreme weather events, we always rethink how smart is it really if we do go and invest in nuclear? Is it really suited for a country that's at the front lines of all these climate risks?
Well, the primary goal of having it in the energy mix that we've included it in the Philippine Energy Plan 2050 is that it's part of our portfolio. It is a low carbon option for us. You do know that with the threats of climate change, the key pillar is really to increase the share of renewable energy. But there's still going to be a portion of our energy requirements that we need to transition towards. And what the Department of Energy is saying and what we're communicating to the public is that it's time to revisit nuclear energy in terms of emission. It's a zero emission proposition. And yes, when it comes to concerns about risks, you do know that Japan, for example, also similarly situated with the Philippines, have operating nuclear power plants, and they're able to do it in a safe, secure manner. With respect, that's right. We've commissioned a survey on how the public perceives nuclear, and what we can tell you, Madam, is that on top of this, even from 2019, when we had that perception survey and awareness, the real concern is on the upfront costs. And what we'd like to highlight, let's say, on this feasibility study that's being done by KHNP is that they'll also offer us possible financing options. Because it's very clear that we would require a large amount of money to bring this in. And what's different now from the previous conversation is that we are also joined by our private sector partners. So the private sector is also actively looking at government, looking at what we're seeing, and we're just paving the way essentially for them that the regulations, the safety, and then of course the messaging to the public is there. So our goal, that leads me to actually why I wanted to jump into it. That's why we're holding this Philippine International Supply Chain Forum next month from November 13, 14, and 15. We're actually bringing in countries that have been in the nuclear space for quite some time, like the United States, Canada, France, South Korea, and Japan, so that our people, whether it's the academe, the private sector, will have an opportunity to interact and hear about the latest trends. It's also giving emphasis on making sure that our private sector partners have access to the information, the same information that us in government will have. And we're inviting everyone. If you're not able to join us physically, we will be streaming some of the panels and portions of it. Again, it's going to be on November 13, 14, and 15 in Soler North. It's the Philippine International Nuclear Supply Chain Forum. We're very much open to have you, so you get to see all of these latest developments and be open about why nuclear might be part of a sustainable option for our country.
Director, it seems that we are still in the introductory phase of embracing nuclear energy, but the president has made it a priority to reduce dependence on fossil fuel. Could you give us the exact breakdown now of how much energy we get from fossil fuels, from renewable energy, just for us to understand what percentage of the pie does each take?
So in terms of the percentage of the pie right now, the biggest portion is still on conventional sources like coal. Renewable energy, in terms of the generation mix, it's already up to 30%. But our goal is by the end of the decade, by 2030, it's higher than 35%. The longer term goal is to make renewable energy at least 50% of our generation mix or higher. So that leaves you a balance of the remaining 50 or 49% for 2050 and beyond. And that's where we're looking at the possible role of nuclear. In fact, in the plan through 2023 to 2050, nuclear will just take a share of anywhere from 7 to at most 10%. So it's really going to still be a balanced mix that we have. So to repeat right now, the biggest share still in terms of power generation mix is still coal. It's roughly almost still half. Renewable energy is now around 30%. That's why we're increasing it to at least 35% again before the decade is over, and at least 50% by 2050, or more than 50% by 2050 and beyond.
Pag renewable, ibig sabihin kasama dyan yung solar, yung wind, offshore wind, tama ba? And geothermal?
Tama. For renewable, we're referring to biomass, solar, wind, geothermal, hydro, ocean. So they call it the big show actually if you do the acronym. So it includes everything that I've just mentioned.
Okay, Director, the last time we spoke to the DOE, it was summer, it was really hot, and we were always going on red alert. We understand what you're trying to do long term, but for this coming summer, now we're not thinking about it because it's kind of windy, it's kind of cool outside, so it's at the back of our mind, but it's just a few months away. What is the energy space looking at in terms of supply for the upcoming summer months?
There's a lot of developments to the credit of the current administration, of course, the push. There are improvements. We do have a better positioned grid transmission requirements. There are projects on grid strengthening that came in, whether here in Luzon, Hermosa, and San Jose. 500 kV was commissioned earlier, a couple of months back. Phases 1 and 2 of Cebu Negros for the Visayas and Cebu Bohol transmission was also commissioned. And we also now have the Mindanao Visayas interconnection project, allowing for the sharing of power between Mindanao and Visayas to up to 450 megawatts. So in terms of what we're seeing, from now until the end of the year, we're not expecting any grid alerts. Outside of the weather disturbances, of course, you are aware that if there's like a typhoon that affects some of the transmission assets, as well as the distribution utilities and our electric cooperatives. But from the forecast that we've been seeing, we're in pretty good shape for 2025 so far.
That's good to hear. So we agree that there are two big issues with nuclear, right? So high upfront costs and safety. The first part you addressed, but what about the safety bit? So Bataan Nuclear Power Plant sits on the coast above sea level, so that's good, but it's also quite near several volcanoes. Chief of them, Mount Pinatubo, which is, if I recall correctly, only about 57 kilometers from the Bataan Nuclear Power Plant. That is not something that can be changed. So what are we doing to mitigate those risks?
Okay. What's good for us is that with respect, let's say, just taking the case of Pinatubo. Pinatubo erupted when the BNPP is already constructed. And structurally, at least from the studies that were done in 2007 and then again in 2016, it had minimal effect into the structural integrity of the Bataan Nuclear Power Plant itself. Now we take on the concern with respect to what happened in Fukushima, wherein the water seeped into the backup generator. That's why it was not unable to safely cool down the systems, leading to the meltdown. Fortunately for us, the location, elevation from sea level of BNPP is higher than in Fukushima. So even at the worst case scenario of a movement in the Manila Trench and a possible tsunami, it will not reach the foot of the facility of BNPP. Now, the other thing that you mentioned that we'd like to disabuse that concern of our public is that there's a volcano that's dormant, that's nearby. We've been communicating to the public, and our scientists or geologists will back this up. When it was constructed, the risk was assessed, and in terms of the age, Mount Natib is the one that you're referring to that's closest to BNPP. The last eruption, if you look at the geological history, that there's even a more recent volcano that erupted nearer to Metro Manila than, and we're not even concerned about it, older or younger than Mount Natib. But I won't go into the technicalities of it, but our goal really is to communicate to the public that for every concern that we have on nuclear, there are scientific and technological interventions that can be done so that it can be safely operated.
But Director, why push for Bataan? Why not just build these newer technology like the modular reactors, for example? Smaller, we can spread it out. We are an archipelago. I believe there was also a study already done earlier, more than a decade ago, and it said it would take billions of dollars just to revive that plant. Wouldn't that money just be more wisely spent on building another facility instead of trying to revive, a lot of people are calling it a white elephant?
The question we wanted when the previous administration came in, and even under this administration, our goal is to put final closure to it. And this would be the more or less the final study, because this will go into everything that you are just exactly mentioning to us. It will look at the technical side. It will look at, can you really operate it? Can you really rehabilitate it? And if the answer is yes, how much? If it's so expensive, will it make economic sense for us to do so? Wouldn't it be better for us to just build a new power plant? Those are exactly the topics of that MOU that will be conducted under the one that was signed with KHNP the other month. That's why we are getting it. And the beauty of that particular feasibility study that will start in January and will get the results in July next year is that we have no commitment. If they say, yeah, you can operate it, this is how much it's going to cost, or hey, you might not be able to operate it, build a new one, this is what's going to cost. That option would have some financing considerations already. Because let me just go back, the top of concern, even from 2019 when we had that perception survey, it's not even on the safety, it's on the cost. So front and center, we're really pushing that the results of this upcoming feasibility study will give us that answer, as well as a financing option for us, so that the strain on our resources will also be not as immediate as people are concerned about.
Well, of course, we do know there's some nostalgia there with the president having his father. This one was an
Commissioned by
uncompleted
Ferdinand Marcos Sr.,
project
yes.
by his
So
father.
it's essentially an unfinished family business for President Bongbong Marcos.
Well, we should find out once and for all whether or not it can be revived by June or July of next year. And
That's right, ma'am. That's what we will be presenting to the public.
But speaking of options and speaking of cost efficiency, there's a proposal in the House of Representatives to develop the West Philippine Sea as an offshore wind power source. Is that also a good alternative? Will that bring us a good amount of energy from renewables?
I think you have to give so much credit to the current administration and the leadership of Secretary Lotilio, because one of the first things that they've done is really come out with a framework for offshore wind. And right now, we have awarded quite a number of service contracts for offshore wind in several corridors of potential here of Luzon, whether it's in northern or in the other side, other seaboard. And yes, we've also even made improvements in our renewable energy service contracting, recognizing through a legal opinion. We've even amended and updated our service contracting rules to allow for greater foreign direct investments, 100% foreign ownership, for example, for some types of renewable energy service contracts. So we're really bringing in attention to reach our targets of at least 35% renewable energy in our power generation mix by 2030, and at least 50% or more than 50% from 2050 and beyond.
all right. On that note, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Keep an eye out for that report.
And we will call you back as soon as June or July comes around. Patrick Aquino, Director of the Energy Utilization Management Bureau of the Energy Department, thank you so much for your time.